Hello tất cả các bạn và chào mừng các bạn đã quay trở lại với Nghĩ Gì Nói Đó số thứ 6 của Khiêm FM. Hôm nay sẽ là số đặc biệt vì mình sẽ dùng tiếng Anh để giao tiếp với các bạn. Vì hôm nay mình sẽ chia sẻ cho các bạn biết những cái cách mà mình đã sử dụng để nói tiếng Anh được tự nhiên như là người bản xứ. Nhưng
Wow.
mà những cái bạn nào mà chưa nghe được tiếng Anh tốt á, thì cũng đừng lo nhé. Tại vì mình sẽ kèm bên dưới một dòng phụ đề vào tiếng Việt để giúp các bạn hiểu rõ hơn thông điệp của mình. Vậy nên chúng ta hãy cùng bắt đầu thôi. If you're learning a language that is not your native tongue, I am sure that learning how to speak it fluently would also be one of your biggest struggle. And the reason behind this is because during a conversation, in order to keep things smooth and keep the flow going, you have less time to process things up here and to produce an appropriate answer to that question compared to when we are, say, writing or reading something. And to make things worse, all of those are conducted in a language that we are not completely familiar with, so it takes way more time for us to execute. But don't you worry, because today I'm going to show you all the tips that I use to get more fluent in English. If you click on this video, I would expect that you have already passed the beginner's phase, the phase where we still have to put in the dry hours of learning all the basic stuff, all the most common 1,000 or 1,500 words, and we have to learn the syntax or the grammar of the language. If you are there already, but still stuck in this intermediate phase, then this video is made for you. So what exactly is fluency? In my opinion, you have fluency in a language when you successfully develop a second identity in that language. So for me, people often tell me that I'm funnier, more confident, and I am more direct when I'm speaking English. But when I switch back to Vietnamese, I am more on the softy side, reserved and shy side. And the truth is that it is also a scientific fact that language shapes the way we think and we behave, because it is a product of tradition, culture, and history. But I'll talk more on this later. But right now, let's all focus on these amazing tips to learn how to speak fluently that I'm showing you down here. I already used these methods way before I came to the US for college, so it's safe to say for you that you can also apply these methods for yourself without having to spend the same amount of money to travel abroad and study over here. The main theme of these methods is to get you used to thinking in English. And why exactly do we want to think in English? The answer is quite simple, because once you get rid of your tendency to translate everything into Vietnamese, your speaking will be much more fluent. More specifically, you don't have to listen to something from your friend in English, translate that sentence into Vietnamese, and then produce an answer in Vietnamese, and then lastly, you translate that sentence back into English and shoot it at your friend. This translation step is the main reason why we have that little verbal interruption when we are conversing, because translation takes up a large chunk of our short-term memory whose capacity is finite. Therefore, by trying to think and respond in English, we would significantly smooth out our interactions with other people. This might be easier said than done, but hopefully what I'm showing you down here could help. The first tip that I use, which was my favorite of all time, is to talk to myself in English. And I know it sounds like an autistic behavior, but trust me, it helps a lot. At first, I was doing this silly self-talking thing as a way to cope with my imposter syndrome, because in high school, I used to be the kid who always think badly of himself. So when I feel a negative emotion, I had to call the emotion out loud, saying that, okay, I'm feeling sad at the moment. Why am I feeling sad? Oh, it might be because I had a bad grade this morning at school, or it might be because this girl who I liked was talking to another man, so I got my ego hurt, and then I get sad. And then by doing that pointing and calling technique, I could identify the cause of my sadness, which I could work on eliminating later. And I always made sure I try to do this in English as well, to increase my exposure to the language back then. This habit soon became a verbal type of journaling that I tie in my day-to-day life. I do it all the time. When I'm at work, when I'm eating, when I'm in my room chilling, or when I'm doing push-ups. Now, whenever I do this, I always guarantee two things that's gonna happen. The first thing is to apply all the new words that I was trying to learn. For example, I still remember the first time I knew of the word cumbersome. When you say that something is cumbersome, it means that the thing is being an obstacle to someone. So I tried so hard to use this word in every situation that I can sneak it in. For example, when I'm at the gym and then there's something in front of me that's too big, like a piece of weight or something, that prevents me from walking forward, I would say, oh my god, this thing is so cumbersome. Or when I have too much homework and they're too difficult, and that prevents me from hanging out with my brothers, I would say, this homework is so cumbersome. This way, you could learn a lot of words and you can learn how to use them as well in the most fun, exciting, and creative ways. The second thing that I try to guarantee is to include as many details to my story as possible, because I figure I wouldn't have much practice if my story is like 2 sentences long. Today I'm so happy and I'm grateful for today. That's it. So you want to add more spices to the story by providing more information about what you did, who you met, and how the events in your day tie up to your mood currently. The more details, the better. For example, you say, oh my god, today is such a good day. Why? Because I finished all the duties that my boss wanted me to do with flying colors, and I feel like I gained a lot of trust from her, and I'm the top dog in the company right now. All of my other coworkers are so bad, they're so below me, and I feel like I'm the best in the place right now. Something silly like that, you know. And also, you can develop a reflex of thinking and responding in English. And moving on, I want to talk to you more about these other 2 tips that I learned from my childhood English teacher, Miss Sung. Any accomplishment in life, big or small up until today, I owe to Miss Sung, because thanks to her, I gained a very, very early access to knowledge that is written in English. And this gives me a very, very big advantage over my other friends. So I don't know if you remember, but back in like 2009, 2010, we used to learn English from those textbooks that are written in English, and then there are some little conversations between the cartoon characters in there, right? So back then, Miss Soon would always have me scan through the chapter at least one time, and then turn on the CD player and listen to the recording. And when I'm listening to the recording, I have to stop periodically to repeat after the sentences in there too. And during those practices, Miss Soon would always draw a big emphasis on how I imitate those characters' intonation, pronunciation, and the rhythmic patterns of the conversations as well. She was to make sure that I say the sentences exactly how the characters in the conversation would say it. The point of this method is to get me used to how a casual Native American dialogue would sound like. Doing this for a long time, I soon developed a sense of how questions are posed and how answers are being addressed in a daily casual conversation, which added so much to my ability to lead and to open a conversation in English so effortlessly. So one way that you can apply this method of mine is to go to YouTube and look for a random video that are of your interest. It could be anything, like how to dress well, how to create good impression on a first date, or how to write a paper. And then when you're listening to the person in the YouTube video, try to pause the person once in a while and then repeat exactly what they're saying. Remember to copy their intonation, their pronunciation, and their rhythmic patterns as well.
Well, Ethan Winters.
Well, Ethan Winters. And sometimes I understand that these videos are made for native listeners, so they could be too quick, too fast-paced for the beginners. In this case, I would suggest you go to TED Talk and then look for a topic that you like to listen to. Because all the speakers at TED Talk speak at a more beginner-friendly pace, and they really have to enunciate their words well in order for their message to be well heard. So just go to TED Talk, turn on the subtitle if you want to, and then spend some time listening to them, pausing the video, and then repeating after them, okay? I'm sure after doing this for a long while, you will soon speak just exactly like a native speaker. Another tip that I used was to look up word definitions from an English to English dictionary instead of an English to Vietnamese dictionary. This habit could be quite challenging to get used to at first because it could be never-ending sometimes. Just imagine looking up a word and then inside that word's definition there is another word that you don't know the meaning of. And then you head off to look for the definition of that word again. And in the definition there's yet another word that you've never seen before. And trust me, this was really frustrating when Miss Sung made me do it. But before long, I could sense that my vocabulary pool skyrocketed thanks to this habit. And the amounts of work that I have to put in studying English was slimmed down over time. This habit really helped me internalize all the rules of English and develop a sense of how words are properly used in a conversation. To make this habit even better, I would also suggest you to look for all the other words that are in the same family with the word that you are seeking after. So for example, you are looking for the verb act, right? Usually on the same page, you would also find words like action, active, actively, activity, or activate. So make sure you have the habits of noting them down and then scanning for their definitions as well. This way, you could significantly decrease the amount of time that you spend on expanding your vocab range, and therefore you can make your conversation sound better, more colorful, and then more fluent. I've already covered all the tips that I use to improve at speaking English, and today I'm gonna invite a friend of mine who is a very eloquent English speaker too, to come here and talk about his journey in learning English. So let's welcome Đăng Khoa. How's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Could you do a little bit of introduction about yourself for my viewers?
Certainly. As Kim has already said, my name is Khoa. Full Vietnamese name is Đăng Khoa. And me and Kim have been friends for 7 years now, starting from when we were 15 years old back in Gia Định High School in Vietnam. Currently, I am in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. I'm doing a Bachelor of Commerce degree at the University of Dalhousie.
Wow, that's cool. I suspect that you already know why you are invited here. I have been really impressed at how you could score a whopping 8.5 overall in IELTS test, and especially 8.5 in speaking. So could you tell us about your thought process before you take the test and what you felt after you took it?
I took the test just to qualify for this high school I was applying to when I was starting to make preparations for my studying abroad journey. At the time, even though I've been learning English all my life, I didn't know a lot about the IELTS exam. I just know it is a standardized English test that I need to get a certain score in if I want to study at the school I want to. And at the time, most of my teachers kind of reassured me that I would pretty comfortably get the score that I was aiming for. That was around 6.5 or 7. So I did prepare for the test. I just didn't put as much thought into it. And I guess that helped a little bit during the test when I wasn't very nervous. And when I got the result of 8.5, I was certainly surprised. It was way higher than my goal of 7. However, I didn't realize how significant it was or how rare that score actually is until much later.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite impressive how you could score an 8.5 on your first try. Especially when it comes to speaking and scoring speaking 8.5, it means that you have an ultra fast speed of information processing, and then you have a certain kind of reflex in English. Do you have any tips or tricks for people who want to get ahead or get better at their speaking game?
It's very tricky with English speaking, especially with the speaking portion of the IELTS test, because it's not only judging your English skills, it's also judging your speaking skills. And depending on who you are, your personality, if you're like a little more introverted, a little more shy, and you didn't get to develop a lot of social skills, it can be probably the hardest area in the test, and also the hardest area to improve upon. Because it's so personality based, you see. If you really want to improve your English speaking skills, the first thing you should do is improve your speaking skills overall. You need to get more comfortable with putting yourself out there, being more quick-witted in response if in your native language, especially for people who have already had an English education from a young age, but still lacking the speaking skills to support it. You really should put yourself out there and just develop that confidence with speaking. And as you become a better and more confident speaker, you will also be a better and more confident English speaker.
I see. Okay. I know that all successes are a result of consistency in doing the same good habits, right? Or are there any good habits that you used to do that put you in a good spot to prepare you for this success?
I could think of two main factors that have contributed to my success. The first one is not necessarily a habit, but more so a personality trait that I developed at a young age, and that is my comfortability and confidence with English. When I speak English, I don't care a lot about whether I speak right grammatically, or whether am I speaking very well or not. I'm just trying to get my point out using the English language as a vehicle. One of my earliest memories of speaking English was that I had this really long and fascinating conversation with a foreigner on a boat trip to Vũng Tàu when I was 8 or 9 years old. I was just walking around the boat and I saw this foreign guy, and I was curious and I just said hi, and our conversation just naturally flows from there. I was asking him where he was from, how has he been liking my country so far. And I told him about Vũng Tàu, the place we were going to, as well as my hometown of Ho Chi Minh City, and some of the history of our people. And that memory kind of solidified a personality trait in me that from then on I was just very comfortable with speaking with foreigners, because I know that they're just people, and connecting with people through English is just English is just a mean for me to connect with people, and that's why I'm not very worried about how well I speak. The second thing that I could think of is probably this weird thing that I used to do that stems from my love for movies and cartoons, and my dream of becoming like an actor, specifically a voice actor, when I was a kid.
Wow.
When I was young, I watched a lot of cartoons on Cartoon Network and Disney Channel, and back then there wasn't any Vietnamese dubbing, only English voices with Vietnamese subtitles. I would watch them, and I would watch those cartoons and remember the scenes that I liked, and later on I would try to act out those scenes as the characters. I would say their lines with like emotions and everything, and that weird habit, or that weird dream of me wanting to be an actor, contributed to me developing a very good English pronunciation from a young age. You probably know, I remember when we were in high school back in Yemen, we were really obsessed with this show Game of Thrones, and we used to like act out some of the scenes. You would be like Tyrion, the little guy. I would be his older father, and we would just act out the scenes. You probably know what I'm talking about.
That was silly times. So let me summarize whatever you've just covered up there. So I think that the main theme of the success of your journey is to keep pushing yourself out there, to go out and about, to talk to foreigners whose native language is English, right? And so that is the element of habits that is built at the very early stage of your life. What about talent? The talent here being the quick-wittedness. Do you consider yourself a quick-witted person?
I would certainly say so. Yeah. Especially with English, and this has contributed to my success in the IELTS speaking exam. I would say I can come up with answers pretty quickly, even when faced with questions that I've never thought of before, or being asked to talk about an experience I never had. Yeah, I would say I did develop a quick-wittedness from my years of just speaking English.
But I feel like that quick-wittedness or that talent would not be honed through years without the habits that you get to build at the very early stage of your life, right?
Certainly.
So I got a question for you. If someone would show up to you and ask, hey, I don't have the talent of the quick-wittedness, and I also don't have the chance to start the habit of speaking to other foreigners at the very early stage of my life, what should I do to get better at speaking at the moment?
I would say they should start developing those habits starting now. Yeah, if you really want to get better, getting to a certain goal, you basically you're trying to become a different person, right? So there's a saying I really like, that you are what you do repeatedly. You are the result of your habits. So if you've never had the chance to do it ever since a young age, don't worry, you can always start now. Just find every chance that you could get to practice what you have, practice what you learn, and develop these good habits, to develop the confidence with English. And the only way to develop confidence is you need to put yourself in situations that you don't know if you're going to do them well or not, and then you do them well. Basically, you're trying to prove yourself wrong. And once you do something that you didn't think you could do very well, your body, your mind would basically would evolve and become a new version of itself. And you would slowly gain that confidence with whatever skill you're trying to learn, in this case, which is your English speaking skills.
I see. So whenever you claim that someone is speaking English well, I think there are two components to that statement, right? The first component is fluency, where you can take in the information, process it at a very fast pace, and then you can shoot the information back at the speaker. And then the second element is how well you can imitate the way that a native speaker would speak, right? So whenever I communicate with you, I also feel the presence of a natural speaker who comes from the country with their native tongue being English. Could you speak more on how you develop yourself to speak like a native?
Well, the first thing is probably my early exposure to the English-speaking culture. I read a lot of English books, watched a lot of cartoons, a lot of movies from a young age, and this exposed me to the English-speaking culture. I could understand better their way of thinking, their sense of humor. And that helped me later on in life when I got the chance to go study abroad. All that pre-acquired knowledge about their culture helped me to make friends with native speakers, get along with my host family, and allowed me to be more immersed in this environment that I found myself in when I studied abroad.
Okay. And I know that for some people, they don't have the privilege to pay such amount of money to attend courses at big English centers like YOLA, ELA, or VUS, or British Council, you know? So they don't have the chance to expose themselves to foreign speaker. Do you know if there is any way to practice English on their own?
Certainly, they could copy my habit of acting out the lines or scenes from the shows or cartoons that you use. You could always practice by yourself. And that leads me to the second point. Even if you can't really afford this English education, you can definitely find a lot of English speaking content on the internet, on YouTube, or from shows or movies you can find on television, and you can immerse yourself in the English language by this way, replacing your entertainment from your native language to English. And being this immersed with it will certainly help you to be more comfortable with listening it and speaking it later on.
Got you. As an eloquent speaker, do you find that being able to speak the language well would give you a defining benefit when you're going to study abroad?
Definitely. I was so grateful that I could speak English as well as I can when I went to Canada to study abroad. It allowed me to, as I said before, connect with my host family. They were wonderful people. It allowed me to make friends that are not only native speakers, but also from all around the world. Right now I have some of my best friends that I met in Canada are now living in Europe. Some of them are in France, Spain. I have a lot of friends in Japan and in Brazil as well. Having the English speaking skills gave me the confidence to broaden my experience, not only limit myself to school activities. I could go out and seek volunteering work in the community, engage with other random people around in my neighborhood. And it has certainly made my life a lot more interesting and my studying abroad experience a whole lot richer.
Wow. I think that's the end of our interview today. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today and sharing all the things that you did to improve at speaking English. I'll see you around.
Thank you for inviting me, Kim. It's been a pleasure.